Today's episode is a specially requested episode about the city of Petaluma in California. Its size is quite humble, with there being over 100 larger cities to be found in this US state. However, its history is very interesting and considerable, as we will find out today. For clarification, the USA state of California is situated in the southwest corner of the United States of America, bordered by the national border with Mexico to the south and the Pacific Ocean to the west. The largest city in California is Los Angeles, which is in the south of California on the Pacific coast. Much of California's population live in close proximity to the Pacific coast due to the comparative advantages. One of the roads that navigates through many towns and cities on a route somewhat adjacent and parallel to the coastline is the US Highway 101. From Los Angeles, the US Highway 101 will continue northwards and will go through San Jose and San Francisco, and then will cross the Golden Gate Strait at the Golden Gate Bridge, continuing on from the bridge approximately 30 miles, and the highway enters Sonoma County and the county's southern point. The first city after this border is Petaluma, and this episode focuses on the history of this area. The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
This is a special episode about the history of Petaluma. America has a rich, unique and fascinating history. Historians have found it difficult to agree on when the first human migration to the Americas took place, but the general consensus is that it occurred during the last ice age between 15 and 20,000 years ago. There is no contemporary written history of the peoples of what would become Northern California from before the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century, but we can safely assume that there were a number of indigenous tribes in the area. When looking at the name Petaluma, it has been determined that this name originated from the Miwok set of languages. Petaluma is also the given name to the river which flows through the city before emptying into San Pablo Bay, which in turn empties into San Francisco Bay, and then the Pacific Ocean via the Golden Gate. The second largest tribe of the Miwok are known to us as the Coast Miwok peoples, and the name Petaluma in the Miwok language suggests a sloping, flat side of a hill, which is accurate for the settlement on the west bank of the river. Interestingly, it has been suggested that the name Petaluma could also be understood to mean a similar thing to some people of the Russian lands of Siberia, and this has helped to generate a theory that the Miwok people are less descended from Ice Age migrants and more from a separate migration of people across the Pacific Ocean from Siberia around 3,000 years ago. This suggested ancestry doesn't apply to all of the tribes of Northern California, but just a select few, including the Miwok. In fact, the tribal presence and density in pre-Columbian California is likely to be quite high, mainly because of the favourable climate and living conditions which allowed diverse tribes to be able to trade with one another to have an easier life. Agricultural practices in California are suspected to have not been as forthcoming as other areas due to the fact that hunter-gathering and fishing was relatively easy. So there was little pressure on societies to become agricultural with any degree of urgency.
European arrival.
European exploration of the Americas is so often focused on the east coast of the continent due to that particular coastline facing Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. The west coast of the Americas has its own story. Spanish conquistadors were in a strong position to exploit their sponsorship and maritime capabilities in the 16th century to good effect. After discovering the Antilles Islands, they would travel beyond to the lands where Central America meets South America. The narrow isthmus at Panama meant that the Spanish quickly discovered the western coast of the Americas. With the Spanish quickly discovering new opportunities, a concerted effort was made to dominate Central America, and a Spanish conquistador called Hernán Cortés led an expedition which resulted in the conquest of lands approximately in southern Mexico at the expense of the indigenous Aztecs. It was during this period that Cortés was told about the mysterious 7 cities of gold to the north and the southwestern lands of what is now the United States. Cortés would make great efforts to explore the west coast, particularly the coastal lands of the Baja California Peninsula. Another explorer under the sponsorship of Spain, called Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, went further north to explore the area which we recognise as the Pacific coast of California. So there is a realistic possibility that members of his party were the first Europeans that the tribesmen of the Miwok encountered, as we believe that Cabrillo reached areas north of San Francisco Bay. Generally, though, the Spanish were not initially very excited with California and chose to invest their energies elsewhere in the Americas. The California coastline became a shipping lane primarily, with little in the way of interaction between Europeans and natives. The Spanish claimed ownership of this coastline, but the English certainly did not respect Spanish imperial claims in the late 16th century, and by the end of the 1570s, the English explorer Sir Francis Drake is reported to have landed in California and had friendly interactions with the local coast Miwok tribes. The Spanish called these most northwestern parts of their viceroyalty of New Spain the Californias. Baja California, or Lower California, extended up as far along the Pacific coast as San Diego, and beyond that point was Alta California, or Upper California. Alta California had no distinguishable northern limits, mainly because nobody had much interest in Alta California until the later half of the 18th century. Although the Spanish claimed ownership of the lands of Alta California from the 16th century, tribes like the Miwok were left to continue their lives relatively unhindered. But this would change dramatically in the late 18th and early 19th century, when Franciscan missionaries ventured into Alta California and aggressively forced conversion on the native tribes. This is why we have so many Spanish place names in California, but they're not just Spanish, they are also religious. The largest of today's cities in California are named after these Franciscan missionaries: Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and San Francisco. Just to name the four largest, are great examples. This is not really a proud moment in European history. Disease and maltreatment of the native tribes of Alta California caused a great amount of suffering and death. The 21st and last and most northern of these missions was established in the settlement of Sonoma, just 10 miles east of Petaluma, in the year 1823, and this was also the only of these missions opened after Mexico had declared independence from Spain. So we could say that this one is a Mexican mission. The site of the original mission church is now a public museum. The mission didn't last too long before it was secularized and the lands of the mission were confiscated. The new Mexican Republic was keen to break links with Spain and were concerned about the Franciscan missions demonstrating loyalty to the Catholic Church in Spain, so all of the Franciscan missions of Alta California were planned to be secularized. The man who took personal responsibility for the secularization was a Californio. Californios were the descendants of Europeans born in the Californias. The Californio's name was Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo, who at the time was a very young man who had served the Mexican state as a respected military general and had even fought against the Miwok tribes. Vallejo's initial responsibility was to give the mission's lands back to the mission workers, but Vallejo would have ambitions of his own. He received a land grant in 1834, and so he established the settlements of Sonoma and Petaluma, with Petaluma being founded on the Petaluma River. The land grants were often a reward for ex-military servicemen and were called ranchos. The lands of Alta California had always been good for the natives, but for New Spain they found that this sparsely populated area was not contributing large amounts in tax money, so they lifted the previous trade restriction, and this now meant that Alta California was open for trade with the rest of the world. By the time of Mexican independence, Alta California was being visited by tradesmen from the United States, the United Kingdom and Russia. Fort Ross on the California coast of San Francisco was established by Russian traders, and the name Ross may have even evolved from the word Rus, the Russian name for their own people. One of the most popular products of California was animal hides. Trade in California increased dramatically during this period.
Americanization.
The modern state of Texas was also a part of Mexico going into the 19th century, but the territory wanted to break ties with Mexico and was even interested in joining the rapidly expanding United States of America. Eventually, Texas gained its independence, and some years later the USA sought to annex the territory, and the Mexicans were far from impressed. A conflict took place, and the aggression spilled over into New Mexico and Alta California. The result was the capture of these territories from Mexico by the USA. Many Californios, like the Texans, had desired independence from the Mexicans, and a Mexican garrison at Sonoma was captured by an American-supported revolt, which is also known as the Bear Flag Revolt. The bear flag, used to represent Californian independence, is similar to the state flag used to this day. A highly significant event happened in the year 1848 around 100 miles east of Petaluma. A man called John Sutter, who had emigrated from Central Europe to Mexico, had established a fort on the Sacramento River in California's Central Valley, and he built a watermill a number of miles east of the fort on the South Fork American River. It was here that gold was discovered, and when news of this discovery spread, there was a global surge of interest in the area. This period of history is called the California Gold Rush. With California now freely accessible to individuals in the United States, a huge amount of people travelled from east to west, and with Alta California being sparsely populated, still mainly full of indigenous peoples, the mass influx of people to the area had a profound and irreversible impact. Those fortune-hungry travellers had little or no regard for the lands that they arrived in. Many indigenous tribespeople were slaughtered by overzealous fortune seekers. Even John Sutter's possessions were looted, leading to his own bankruptcy. The gold reserves of California had a great and positive impact on the United States economy, as larger organisations with expensive equipment pulled the rug out from underneath the individual prospectors. The population of California trebled within just a few years, and California would be admitted as an official state of the USA. Cities would be established to settle the bulging population. Sutter's fort would grow to become Sacramento, and settlements around San Francisco Bay became significant, including San Francisco itself and Oakland. The southern Sonoma County settlements of Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Sonoma expanded as a consequence. By the end of the 1850s, this area of California was almost unrecognisable compared to just 15 years earlier. In some respects, this was impressive, but in others, it was terrible. The Spanish had caused hardship and suffering to the indigenous tribes, but this was nothing compared to the Americans, whose state authorities actually encouraged some of the worst types of maltreatment of the indigenous peoples. Even though the population of California increased significantly, the population of indigenous peoples was slashed. The United States incorporated Sacramento, originally Sutter's Fort, in 1850, and it chartered San Jose in the same year, thereby giving the first legal recognition and rights of legislation to the city's authorities to cities in California. The city of Sonoma was incorporated quickly after, and therefore the first city in Sonoma County to receive that distinction. Petaluma would be incorporated 8 years later, but interestingly, Sonoma had to be unincorporated in 1862 due to financial difficulties, although it is understood that Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo himself benefited financially from this move. The California Gold Rush was an incredible period of history, and a lot of wealth was generated, but it was disastrous for some. Some prospectors would invest heavily in land, equipment and manpower in order to fill their coffers, but due to intense competition and exploitation, some would lose all of their fortunes. By the end of the 1850s, the opportunities were exhausted and the gold rush was over. The next big production of California was that of fossil fuels, but this was more prevalent in the south of California. The cities in the north would have to look elsewhere for opportunities, such as in banking, manufacturing and shipping. The wealth and interest generated by the gold rush caused new cities such as San Francisco to rapidly expand, so the manpower was there to explore new opportunities and industries, and if it could demonstrate its attractiveness as a region, then the thriving cities of the East would look to find ways to do business with the newly Americanized cities of the West. The possibilities existed in railroad construction. The first railroads in California appeared in the 1850s, but the settlements of Sonoma County did not see railroads until much later due to the convenience of the river systems. The settlements of Sonoma and Petaluma were built on rivers which emptied into San Pablo Bay, so access to the evergreen settlements of San Francisco and Oakland was quite easy. Certainly Petaluma benefited notably from the opportunity to transport agricultural yield to the expanding cities to the south. All the while, newcomers to California continued expanding north of Sonoma County into Mendocino County, where natives continued to be slaughtered.
Chicken processing.
Much as the more northern incorporated settlements of Sonoma County, such as Santa Rosa and Healdsburg, were prospering, these would be established on the Russian river system, and so they would not enjoy the same opportunity to supply the huge cities of San Francisco Bay as Petaluma would. The big moment for Petaluma would come when a young Canadian man called Lyman Bice went into business with his dentist, a man called Isaac Diaz. Diaz had invented and patented an incubator that could maintain the temperature of eggs and therefore dramatically speed up the production of both chickens and eggs. With the bulging populations of the metropolis around the San Francisco Bay, eggs were in high demand, so plenty of chicken farms were opened in and around Petaluma, and eggs were travelling down the Petaluma River to San Francisco Bay in abundance. Diaz and Bice established the Petaluma Incubator Company, which occupied a building which was eventually demolished in the 1960s, but used to stand on the grassy void on Petaluma Boulevard, adjacent to the Brewster's Beer Garden building. Everybody was interested in purchasing an incubator from the Petaluma Incubator Company, and the company originally went from producing and selling dozens at the turn of the 1880s to producing and selling many thousands by the early 1890s. The Leghorn chicken had been introduced to America from Italy in the early 19th century, and it was popular due to its laying frequency. So when the Leghorn chicken was introduced to the chicken farmers of Sonoma County, egg production accelerated and reached many millions of eggs every year by the mid-1910s. The city's baseball team was called the Petaluma Incubators in respect of its primary industry. We tend to forget about Diaz's place in the story, as Bice would become the face of the company after the untimely death of Isaac Diaz in 1884. Bice would oversee the fortunes of the company after its egg production and distribution extended beyond the local area thanks to the established railroad systems in California and the United States of America beyond. As mentioned before, the egg production of Petaluma by the 1910s was incredible. Huge deposits of money were being housed in Petaluma banks. A commercial advertising guru called Bert Kerrigan was brought in to further promote Petaluma eggs on a huge scale. Using the medium of newsreels in movie theatres, he would coerce the Chamber of Commerce to invest in lavish stunts and activities to catch the eye of potential investors. Kerrigan would brand the city of Petaluma as the world's egg basket and create a national egg day with all the theatrics of egg parades and other similar egg-themed events. Eventually, Kerrigan's exorbitantly expensive stunts would see him fall out of favour with the Chamber of Commerce. The egg industry in Petaluma slowed down after the 1910s and the days of Kerrigan's histrionics. One notable company that opened in 1923 was a chicken pharmacy where farmers could take their sickly chickens for advice and help. Lyman Bice lived until the age of 91 and eventually passed away in Petaluma in the year 1944. Descendants of Bice still live in Petaluma today.
The 20th century.
In 1906, Northern California was rocked by a huge earthquake, estimated to have been at 7.9 on the moment magnitude scale. There has been no larger earthquake in the contiguous United States since. San Francisco was hit hard by the earthquake, with over 3,000 deaths, around 1% of the city's population. 80% of the buildings in the city were damaged or destroyed. Downtown Santa Rosa was destroyed by the earthquake, but remarkably, Petaluma was relatively unscathed, and this is thought to be because the city is on top of a relatively stable bedrock. This means that Petaluma has kept a good number of its pre-1906 buildings, giving it quite a unique attraction. Although there has been a degree of redevelopment in Petaluma, those buildings that were spared demolition through a lack of funding were restored when families from big cities started seeking a more peaceful and affordable lifestyle from the 1960s. Of course, this is also when the Petaluma Incubator Company's central building was demolished. What remains in Petaluma today is an array of urban architecture spanning from the earliest years of the city's incorporation through to the modern day. The urban architecture before the San Francisco earthquake is quite unique in this area of California and has become an attraction for those wishing to capture such properties on film. A long list of films and television advertisements have chosen to take advantage of the filming opportunities available in Petaluma. Notably, the US presidential campaign of Ronald Reagan in 1984 featured footage on location in Petaluma with its Morning in America televisual campaign. One particular film that featured the streets and buildings of Petaluma was the 1973 comedy drama called American Graffiti, the first film made by the American film studio Lucasfilm, founded by the American filmmaker George Lucas. One of the parking lots used in the film is adjacent to possibly the most iconic building in Petaluma, the McNair Building. The McNair Building has a history all of its own. It's just a short walk up Petaluma Boulevard north from what used to be the Petaluma Incubator Company's building to the point where the street doglegs round to the left and becomes Petaluma Boulevard south. The building sits between Petaluma Boulevard and 4th Street, and the first part of it was constructed in 1886 by John Augustus McNair, an ambitious businessman who had moved to Petaluma in the 1850s. McNair was held in high regard by his peers for his kindness and honourability. He was a man who recognised the commercial potential of Petaluma and made great efforts to build up its shipping capabilities at a time when Petaluma's agricultural strengths aided the supply of the much larger cities of San Francisco Bay. You may recall that we mentioned that this was a period of the emergence of the railroad, and McNair supported the construction of an important railroad that connected Petaluma to Sonoma County's capital city, Santa Rosa, which, if you remember, is connected to the Russian River system, which meant that it somewhat was detached from Petaluma, with no obvious manner in which to transport in bulk between the two cities. The McNair building was extended in the year 1911 to resemble its appearance now. The extension houses the Mystic Theatre, while the original building now houses a bar. The irony of this is that John A. McNair is remembered from being teetotal. Back in the 1850s, the Wiseman family arrived in Sonoma County from Missouri. They operated the Melita Station Inn on the outskirts of Santa Rosa on the Santa Rosa Creek, which I believe may still be open for business. Their son, Fred, was born in the 1870s and served in the Spanish-American War in 1898, before opening a bicycle shop in Santa Rosa, which was destroyed by the 1906 earthquake. Santa Rosa was not spared in the same way as Petaluma by the quake. It was after this that Fred moved to San Francisco and pursued his interest in racing cars, and after actually going to see the Wright Flyer for himself, he would develop an interest in flying. The Wright Flyer was the first airplane to make a sustained flight and was built by the American aviation pioneers Orville and Wilbur Wright. Fred would build his own airplane at the site of what is now Charles M. Schulz Sonoma County Airport, just northwest of Santa Rosa. Charles M. Schulz was the creator of the Peanuts comic strip featuring Charlie Brown and Snoopy, and Schulz lived in Sonoma County for most of his life. Going back to the story of Fred Wiseman, it would be in the year 1911 that Fred was able to deliver mail from Petaluma to Santa Rosa using his airplane, and this can be cited as the first post office sanctioned airmail flight, although it wasn't without issues. The airplane had to land and take off again during the operation. Fred lost his excitement for hands-on aviation not long after and lived out his years in Santa Rosa before passing away at the age of 85 in 1961. The man affectionately known as Mr. Petaluma is Bill Sobranes, who was born in 1921 with ancestral links to Californios and to Irish migrants. The Sobranes lived around a short 10-minute walk up East Washington Street from the centre of Petaluma around the McNair building. Bill Sobranes was of age when the Second World War brought the United States into its story, and Sobranes joined the Merchant Marine. When Sobranes returned to Petaluma, he pursued his passion for photography, and his favourite target was the people of Petaluma, often at leisure, whether playing sport or simply socialising. Sobranes would be looking for the biggest characters with the best look, and he would use his passion for observing life in Petaluma to obtain a job writing for the Petaluma News. Sobranes would use his newfound public forum to campaign for a new firehouse in the city whose population was now expanding, and the success of his campaign led to celebration of his achievement for the city. Sobranes would write for various newspapers with his relentless energy. He would network on little sleep, meeting and speaking to as many people as possible, and travelling to San Francisco to meet and be photographed with as many famous people as he could manage, even if it involved photobombing them. His insatiable energy earned him attention. Sobranes loved Petaluma at a time when Petaluma was changing dramatically from its self-sustaining fortune as Bert Kerrigan's World's Egg Basket to a hugely populated modern town, losing its prestige in chicken farming to modern industrial scale production. If people felt that Petaluma was losing its identity and character during this period, Sobranes was keen to prove it wasn't. Sobranis was attracted to events in Petaluma that he believed deserved to be fondly and proudly known and celebrated by the residents of Petaluma. A great example is when he stumbled across wrist wrestling competition taking place in the back room of a cocktail lounge called Gilardi's Corner during the 1950s. Attendees would be excited about this backroom competition, striking bets on the outcome, and Sobranis was fascinated by this nucleus of human excitement in Petaluma. A frequent visitor, a trainer for the Detroit Tigers baseball team called Jack Hummel, claimed that he was unbeatable at wrist wrestling. The same claim was being made by a rancher claimed to be the strongest man in Petaluma, Oliver Kohlberg. Sobranis smelled an opportunity and publicised a contest between Hummel and Kohlberg that drew the attention of the city. The wrist wrestling match itself went on for 3 minutes before the table collapsed between the two men and the competition was declared a draw. In the aftermath, Sobranis teamed up with Hummel and Kohlberg to organise more wrist wrestling competitions, and the interest in this form of competition grew to a national scale. In 1969, ABC's Wide World of Sports began to televise the event. Sobranis eventually passed away in his early 80s in 2003, but his legacy remains in Petaluma. He saw opportunities in what he observed and publicised those things for the benefit of Petaluma. His work was a labour of love, and he could still be seen typing on the porch of his house back in the same but much redeveloped Old East neighbourhood of East Washington Street that he grew up in. Along with the wrist wrestling competition, Sobranis brought to the spotlight many other events such as Petaluma's Whiskerino contest, which celebrates facial hair growth, the Petaluma Harry Houdini seance, where participants would attempt to contact the great escapologist from beyond his grave, and Petaluma's World's Ugliest Dog contest, which celebrates amazing looking dogs from alternative backgrounds to those bred specifically for dog shows. The dog contest continues to this day, a legacy of Sobranis. Sobranis promoted Petaluma for many different things and put Petaluma back on the map since the decline of its status as the great egg-producing settlement in the United States in the days of the advertising guru Burt Kerrigan. Both men made Petaluma famous, and it appears that Sobranis did meet Kerrigan despite their heydays being separated by a couple of generations. Their meetings are highlighted by Kerrigan advising Sobranis not to put all of his eggs in one basket. Situated in the heart of Petaluma Valley, the city of Petaluma now has 60,000 residents. In today's world, the corridor between Petaluma and Santa Rosa, the route of Highway 101, was also known as Telecom Valley, celebrating the amount of telecommunications companies which operated in and around the Redwood Business Park area to the city's north.
You have one new message. Translating. Disney and Pixar's Hoppers is now available on Disney+.
You could say that again.
Critics are calling it Pixar's funniest movie ever and a wildly entertaining ride. Blizzard Potato. It's certified fresh and verified hot.
Now we party.
This is incredible!
Wow, I am clearing the rest of the day.
Disney and Pixar's Hoppers, now available on Disney+. Rated PG.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro cat food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
Thank you very much for listening to this week's special episode of the History of the World podcast about Petaluma and southern Sonoma County. And the reason why we did this episode is thanks to the opportunity given to us by one of our History of the World podcast Illuminati members, Mandy Kirk, who specially requested this episode. And thank you, Mandy. What a great suggestion it was to make to commission this special episode about such a wonderful place with such a rich history. And I'll be rambling on a little bit more about it in the debrief, so be sure to listen to that, especially you, Mandy. If you enjoy the podcast and you want to support the podcast, then visit our website, historyoftheworldpodcast.com. There's loads to do there. But if you click on the Patreon link and sign up to make a monthly contribution, you will become a lifelong member of the History of the World podcast Illuminati and qualify for gifts and rewards, such as commissioning your own special episode. That's a possibility. This week, we welcome to the History of the World podcast Illuminati Shannon, Lars Torhauger, and Alexander Skorikov. I hope I've pronounced your names somewhat close to what they should have been, but thank you and welcome. If you'd like to get in touch with the podcast, please drop me a line at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. I love hearing from you. And you can also follow the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Tumblr, Threads, and Mastodon. And if you can't get enough of the podcast, as I've just mentioned, please look out for the special debrief episode where I'll be talking some more about the episode that you just listened to and a few extra little bits and bobs.
Listener messages and reviews.
An email from our good friend Shannon in New Zealand, who's put, I wanted to say a huge congratulations on your 6th year. Wow, it's hard to believe this podcast is as old as my second child. I also wanted to apologise for not communicating more. I've been a bit embarrassed because I've not been able to contribute yet. Nothing bad, just things get a bit tight over winter here. I will definitely be buying a few books for the podcast for you to celebrate this milestone and hopefully many more to come. Thanks, Shannon. Well, Shannon, much as I appreciate and I value everyone's financial contributions, I don't think the History of the World podcast would be where it is without people's financial contributions. Having said that, this is a free project and it's there for you to enjoy, so don't feel that you have to do it. Only do it if you can. So obviously our personal lives are far more important than our leisure lives, let's say. You've got to get your priorities right. But obviously, to those of you who do contribute to the podcast, I'm very, very grateful. It really, really helps, and it's really helped to change the podcast into what it is today. So well done to every one of you, and thanks, Shannon. Continue to enjoy the podcast, whether you are able to contribute or not, and that goes for all of you who listen, all of you hot welders. We also have a message from Nick Kabilafkas. Now, you might remember Nick Kabilafkas qualified to commission his own special episode, a bit like Mandy Kirk did for this week's one. Nick was the one who requested the episode on Roman Greece, and he's put, Dear Chris, thank you for your wonderful episode on Roman Greece that I just finished listening to. which I very much enjoyed, as I am enjoying your podcast generally and learning a lot. I hope you are still enjoying the podcast and that life is treating you well. Yes, I'm loving the podcast, Nick. Don't worry about that. And he's also put, just listen to the wrap-up episode. Happy 6th birthday to the history of the world. What an amazing achievement. Yes, it is quite an achievement. I don't know where those 6 years have gone. They've just come and gone, haven't they? Mastodon. We're on Mastodon. We don't really hear a lot about Mastodon. I think it's one of the less well-known social media exchanges compared to other ones such as Facebook or X. But Cupcake Rob has said, I think I know how the 9th Spanish Legion mysteriously disappeared. Now, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had a special episode again about the Roman 9th Spanish Legion, who mysteriously disappeared, and that's what they're most famous for. And Cupcake Rob has suggested that it might be aliens. Well, who knows? Who knows? It could be aliens, couldn't it? How can we disprove that theory? We can't, can we? So it could be. But thank you, Cupcake Rob, and thank you for engaging on Mastodon. It's great to see people engaging with the podcast on Mastodon. Jack Mardlin has got in touch through Patreon and has put, Chris, I don't have a transcript, but thought I had received a message that I'd reached a contribution level that allowed for a gift. Is this correct? Did I reply with my selection I never received? So wondering. Jack, yes, you do qualify for a gift. You have made the relevant contributions. It's actually a gift pack, and it does take a little bit of time for me to dispatch these things, basically, because I have to order them in and then I have to wrap it myself. I don't really have a gift department. The gift department is me. So I have to make time to gather the gifts and then redistribute them out. I have to print off the postage labels, depending on where you are in the world, etc. And then one thing and another. So it is on its way. I will never forget any of you that have qualified for gifts, and if you are concerned, by all means do get in touch. It can take me a little while to get round to getting it done, so I apologise to anyone who is waiting, but they will definitely be dispatched. Don't worry about that. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to listen to the debrief episode that accompanies this one, so just look for that on your podcast feed. But until next time, I think the next episode will be going back to the regular schedule, volume 4, and we'll be going down to Myanmar and talking about the medieval Pagan kingdom of Myanmar. So we'll be learning about an area that we've not really spoken about before. Should be interesting, that little area of the world wedged between Southeast Asia and the cultures of India. That should be interesting. Anyway, thanks very much, and until next time, be good.
The History of the World podcast, written and presented by Chris Hasler. Please consider making a financial contribution by going to the historyoftheworldpodcast.com website and clicking on the Patreon link. Email the show at historyoftheworldpodcast@mail.com. And don't forget to join our social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Tumblr. See you next time.